Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Bakers High School Huddle, where we talk high school football all night long. Frank Frangie, along with Justin Barney from the Florida Times-Union. And this season's moving along. We were just talking about it. Hard to believe this thing's almost over, isn't it?
Yeah, it's moves by quick once the preseason gets over and done with, and the regular season games. I mean, it's just like almost a fast forward button. These district games start flying. Regular season's over before you know it.
Boy, it really has done that. So many games to talk about, and so many games that we have talked about over the course of the season. Now, we focused a lot on individual performances. Jamauri Wakefield had another big game. We'll certainly talk about him. We've focused on a lot of Duval County schools, but today we're going to go to St. Johns County. Our game of the week on Friday night was a fantastic game from St. Johns County, and somewhat of a historic game when Creekside and Bartram got together. It's always a terrific matchup when any of those St. Johns County schools get together. And Justin, this one turned out to be historic. Creekside, by now people know, won the game 37-24. Some stories before we get to the video. Greg Stanton had not beaten Bartram. Bartram had only missed the playoffs one time when eligible in 13 years, and they missed it again this time.
They did, and if you look back at this history, there's not much favorable history for Creekside. The closest game that these two have played was a 14-point loss for Creekside, 24-10 victory for Bartram in 2010. So you got to think Bartram, a little inexperienced, but still being that big brother, having that experience factor over Creekside, and having that kind of that death grip on Creekside in terms of winning. And you just expected Bartram Trail to pull through.
All right, they turned the tables, did Creekside. Let's get right to the videotape. Creekside at home against Bartram on a Friday night. And by the way, Bartram started this thing in great shape. This is Bryce Walker. Watch this now to start the game. Bryce Walker goes 93 yards, a 93-yard touchdown. And boy, it looked good for Bartram out of the gate, didn't it?
Yeah, Bartram, and these kind of breaks have gone Bartram's way in this series. So you start out there, if you're a Bartram fan, you say much of the same.
But this time it wasn't much of the same. Blake Morgan got the scoring started for Creekside. That is a 5-yard touchdown run. That ties the score. And just like that, Creekside at home, you could tell they're fired up now. Look at that. You could tell they're fired up. Creekside didn't let up. Bryan Rivera this time, an 8-yard touchdown run. Creekside up to a 14-7 lead. They were playing well early.
Very good. That ground game has carried Creekside this season. 289-yard rushing performance for Blake earlier in the season.
This is Jordan Smith, the Bartram quarterback. He's going to get hit and fumble. Again, Creekside playing very well defensively as well, not just offensively, but on the defensive side of the ball. They were not able to score a touchdown after that, but it did lead to this Garrison Turnage field goal, 25-yarder, 17-7. I think the Creekside people could start feeling it then, couldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is that upper hand in this rivalry is something that Creekside has never had, and they got it going early and kept it going.
Blake Morgan, a 4-yard touchdown run. That made it 23-7. They missed the extra point, but they were certainly rolling at this point, was Creekside. Now, Jordan Smith, again, this is a fumbled snap. That led to a field goal that Bartram Trail had to settle for. Tyler Gallett, a 30-yarder, that made it 23-10. So Bartram Trail, which is accustomed to winning this thing, was still in it at this point.
Very much alive and in this, special teams and defense, and you mentioned that mental edge over Creekside that they'd held, and you see it slipping away here.
Jeremy Bolu, that big physical linebacker fullback, he scores from 6 yards out. That makes it 30-10. Now you kind of knew. You see the celebration in the end zone. Now you had a little bit of a feeling, didn't you? But Bartram Trail didn't back down. Jordan Smith to A.J. Bolden, 5-yard touchdown. They got it to a 2-possession game, 30-17.
That's what you want in this game for Bartram Trail. You figure at some point these breaks are going to go your way.
All right, but too much Bolu, 5-yard touchdown run. That made it 37-14. That was the final score for Creekside. Sort of an oh-by-the-way score late. David Coleman, a 10-yard run. Now, that made it 37-24 inside of a minute to play now, okay? That extra point made it 37-24. We are inside of a minute. You see it right there, 45 seconds. So there's still hope. It's small hope, but the onside kick does not go their way. There you go. You see Creekside falling on it. And Creekside is going to the playoffs in 4-6A. They may not win the district. St. Augustine could. Look at the celebration. You know what? Those kids deserve that. A great win for Creekside and Greg Stanton, who had never beaten Bartram Trail. They win it 37-24 behind some terrific play, the ground game, and that is a big win in District 4-6A. Changes the district, at least for 1 year, just a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this is the game that Coach Greg Stanton has been pointing towards, kind of the step for his program that they needed to take to beat that Bartram Trail program. These guys separated by just a few miles, and they've never done it before. They just did not get it done against that rivalry game against Bartram.
That is a great district. I mean, St. Augustine rules that district. But Creekside, I remember, has gone deep before. I remember they beat Kenny at Kenny in one of the Johnny Wolford years, a game that people couldn't remember, couldn't believe they had won. Bartram Trail just keeps putting Division I quarterbacks behind each other. That's one of the best districts in the state, certainly this part of the state, is it not?
Yeah, St. Augustine has come out of these districts before, went 15-0, won a state championship in 2005, played for another couple state titles. So getting out of this district is definitely means you're a good program.
Okay, so how does the district wind up? St. Augustine and Creekside have clinched spots, right? How does the whole thing wind out? Who wins the district?
St. Augustine hasn't clinched yet, but it's, you got to go with St. Augustine to clinch this district. So Creekside and St. Augustine, I think the winner of that game obviously will be district champ, district runner-up. So Creekside, the only team officially with a spot punched in 4-6A.
All right, congratulations to Greg Stanton and the Creekside Knights. They deserve it. They win 37-24 over Darrell Sutherland, a terrific football coach, and that Bartram Trail team. Let's take a break. But we're just getting started, and we've talked a lot about teams I know you know about. We've talked about Trinity. We've certainly talked about First Coast. We probably haven't talked enough about the White Commanders, but they're one of the better teams in town. They won big in a West Side battle on Friday night. We'll talk about it after this. Welcome back to the Huddle, everybody, where we talk high school football. You know, we've talked a great deal over the years about First Coast and Raines and some of the dominant public school programs. I almost think White gets left out too often. That program's been good for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, very good program, very good under Dan Dish when he was there, and also Terry Gilliam when he was there, and now Paul Pearson's doing it. And he's only 2 years, but he's getting some things done there.
They certainly have done a terrific job. So let's focus our attention now on White and Lee. Both teams are playing very well in their district. Now, you knew White probably was the better of these two teams, two terrific programs, but two teams, West Side rivals for years. White and Lee and West Side, which was then Forest High School, had some great rivalry games, but it was White and Lee, and these are two terrific teams. And as we start the videotape a little bit, you can tell these are physical teams that like playing against each other. These guys are excited. Look at them running out. This is White at home. These guys were excited about this game.
Yeah, it's a rivalry game. You know, bragging rights on the West Side at stake in this one. So these guys came to play.
Yeah, they really did. And it was a physical game. And I think that's kind of a cool thing. We talked about this. We talked about it with Fernandina and West Nassau. We've talked about it with other teams. It's kind of cool when teams get together and it's physical and they like playing against each other. So the scoring started, by the way, with Lee, a Darren Hayes 31-yard field goal. Lee got on the board first. I don't think anybody saw that come.
Yeah, Lee has done things this year, not as much on offense, but special teams and defense has been a forte.
But it didn't take long. They kicked off, and here comes Javaris Davis, 88-yard kickoff return. We've showed a lot of those this year on the Huddle, haven't we? That's a great kickoff return.
Quite a few. And then, you look back last week with the big time in West Nassau, the kick returns, and Ed White has had quite a few of these on special teams.
Charles Mitchell to Deshaun Patterson here. That makes it 13-3. It's a 37-yard touchdown pass, and then the White defense really took over after that, really swarming this Lee offense. Really just nowhere to go for Lee. That's how good the White defense was. Play after play, Lee is running, just trying to get out of there, and then that turned it back over to the White offense. Taylor Thomas is a good back. A 5-yard touchdown run makes it 19-3. Fantastic
back, and he's a football bowl subdivision kind of back, and we see why.
Now watch this. This would have been an 88-yard return, but watch right now. Can't do that, Taylor. Not in high school football. They threw the flag during the play. That negated the return, and then they don't get any points out of this. Trevor Sigler, the quarterback, trying to convert a fourth down. He cannot do so. So certainly that mistake by Taylor Thomas wound up hurting White. That's a lesson for a young player. Don't celebrate at all, but certainly not until you're in there. Nonetheless, this Derek Jones fumble, White gets the ball back, and now Eddie Edwards on a 6-yard run. This made it 26-3, and at this point it looked like it was all Commanders.
Yeah, all Ed White, and just the assembly line of backs over there. Taylor Thomas, Eddie Edwards, Deshaun Patterson, Javaris Davis.
All right, so they continue to battle here. This is picked off. What a nice interception that is. That's Jadaris Bird. What an athletic play. Didn't really get north and south very well, did he? But he certainly made a terrific interception there.
A lot of defense with these guys. Safety's great, defensive backs are great, and that pressure up front just makes it difficult for quarterbacks to throw.
Lee tried to battle back here. Screen pass to Cameron Wakefield. Good little run here down the sideline. Lee was certainly battling in this thing. That set up a field goal, a second Darren Hayes field goal of the night, a 35-yarder. That cut the score to 25-6, but that was going to be about it for Lee. Davis, another touchdown run. That is from 7 yards away, made it 33-6 after the 2-point conversion. And then Thomas, a final touchdown run. That made the final score 41-6. And White with a very, very good program. They go on and they beat Lee in a battle on the west side, White goes on to win that against Lee on Friday night. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those West Side teams. You know, Trinity's on the West Side. Now, their players, they're a private school, so their players can come from a lot of different areas, but they're still a West Side school. White, West Side has a good team. Even though they didn't play well on Friday night, West Side's got a very good team. Boy, there's a lot of athletes concentrated in that area of town, aren't there?
Yeah, a lot of guys coming over from that. I mean, you look at back, even going back years, how good that Ed White team has been, how good Trinity has been, how good Forest, when Forest was had a little run there, pocket of success. I mean, just so many good guys in that area of town.
Yeah, and it really is. And Dan Dish is a friend who we've talked a long time. I know when he was at White, he used to feel like they were always an underdog, because that's when Raines had Lito Shepard and Jabbar Gaffney and so many good players, and that was a rivalry game as well. And I know Dan used to feel like White was a bit of an underdog. They weren't talked about. During the Corky Rogers Lee years, White was kind of unheralded. During the Raines years, they were kind of unheralded. I get the feeling it's the same way, don't you? I don't think that's changed very much. We still find ourselves talking about First Coast and Fletcher, and they deserve it. They're really good programs. And Trinity and Bowles. Slowly, Paul Pearson's done a nice job. He's changed the mentality of that program too, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you look at those teams you mentioned, the Bulls, the First Coast, those guys have had that success in the playoffs, and that's something that that Ed White had, you know, has not had even with Coach Dish, Coach Pearson. Ed White last year got hammered by Bartram Trail in the first round of the playoffs. So I think when you talk about those other teams, they're more established in that postseason time, and I think Paul Pearson wants to do that and is trying to do that in this couple years there.
So what is the path now for White as they try and make the playoffs? Who would they play? What is the matchup? You made a good point. White and Bartram Trail a year ago. What about this year as White tries to move on?
Yeah, you're looking at, they would play that adjacent district, and that's the St. Johns County district, that District 4 6A champion, and that's going to probably be, you know, St. Augustine or Creekside will come out of there. So White, if they win their district, they still have some technicalities there. They would probably host a Creekside in that first round of the playoffs. So St. Johns County teams are dangerous. So I don't think after last year, Ed White can discount anybody.
Quickly, clear up the technicalities as you put them with regard to White trying to win their district.
You know, White is still, obviously White is the favorite, but I mean, there could be a district tiebreaker scenario. Obviously would have to have some upsets, a Middleburg or an Inglewood perhaps coming out of there and causing some trouble.
All right, but Ed White playing very well, very deserving to win for the Paul Pearson and that White Commander football team. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, we've showed you some public schools. We're going to talk about a few private schools in town. Jamauri Wakefield just keeps running, and that's a nice little rivalry developing when Providence and Episcopal play. That was on Friday night. I was at that game, so was Justin. And then after that, we'll talk about a Thursday nighter that involved Trinity on the national stage. That's next. So stick around. Welcome back to the Huddle, everybody. Frank Frangie, Justin Barney, talking high school football with you. Now, look, we focused on the public school. Let's talk about some of the private school games involving prominent teams in our area. Let's start with Providence Episcopal. That's a neat rivalry. Schools aren't very far apart. It could be a cool little rivalry, couldn't it?
Yeah, in the last 2 years especially, we've seen that. District 1 3A rivals, and I think if you've seen that on the field the last 2 years, these guys are basically playing in a playoff game in the regular season.
All right, you and I were both at that game. It was kind of a cool game when these two teams get together, Providence and Episcopal, and hopefully that will evolve into kind of a neat little rivalry. So let's go right to the videotape, and the videotape, by the way, means Jamauri Wakefield. It's one of the reasons I went. I wanted to see this guy play. He is as good as advertised. So the scoring started, Justin, when Episcopal kind of pinned Providence back, and Providence had to put a drive together that ultimately wound up in a 44-yard touchdown run.
Yeah, Jamauri Wakefield, it was all Jamauri on this drive. 4 carries, 80 yards, and really no surprise what Providence is going to do when they have the ball.
Jamauri Wakefield with a 44-yard touchdown run. That started the scoring. It was a good physical game now. The teams went back and forth. It was only 7-0 at the end of the quarter, but the teams went back and forth. Then Wakefield an 18-yard touchdown run. That made it 14-0 is Providence, but it looked like it was going to stay there. Back and forth these teams went. It was physical play. It looked like it was going to stay there until the end of the half. Bizarre sequence. Providence gets the ball back, Justin. They throw a couple incomplete passes. They're in the final 10 seconds of the half. Looks like they're going to run out the half, and they hand the ball to Wakefield, and he goes 56 yards.
Yeah, you know, you're in a 3rd and 7, and you're thinking maybe a Hail Mary pass at the end. Providence going to try, or basically just going to half sitting on a 14-0 lead. They give the ball to Jamauri Wakefield, 14 seconds to go. He takes the ball, gets a great block downfield, 56 yards. Later, it's a 21-0 Providence lead.
All right, so 21-0 at the half. We go to the second half. The Providence passing game, they don't throw it very much, but here's Carter Bradley, Gus Bradley's son, a ninth grader who's going to be a good player. He's got to get a little bigger, but he's a good player. You know, he comes from great football lineage. The head coach of the Jaguars is his dad, Carter Bradley, here to Adam Baselli, the younger son of Tony Baselli, a 23-yard touchdown. Adam's going to be a good player. Andrew's the one getting all the attention now, but Adam's going to be a college player too.
Yeah, you know, you got the lineage there, and you look at the brother Andrew Baselli, fantastic offensive lineman. He's a junior. You got to think as a position switch for Andrew. You know, Tony plays offensive line, Andrew offensive line, and Adam Baselli, a receiver, tight end.
Yeah, that's exactly what it'll be, probably a linebacker, tight end type. Then Jamauri Wakefield finished off the scoring with a 9-yard touchdown run, finished off the scoring for Providence there. Episcopal did get on the board. A.J. Wooten on a catch on a 15-yard pass from JoJo Brunell, Mark Brunell's son. This finishes off the scoring, this touchdown pass. I think JoJo Brunell is going to be a good player. He's only a sophomore. He's got to put on some weight, but he throws a good ball. You can tell he's been coached by a quarterback. I mean, I think Mark's son's going to be a good player.
Yeah, I told that to Mark after the game the other night, and I think he's going to be a very good player once he gets some strength behind him. He throws a good ball, a tight ball, and I think, you know, once he gets some more experience, some game experience, only a sophomore, I think he's going to be a heck of a player.
You told our friend Mark Brunell he's going to be a good player. Mark said he just needs better coaching, right?
That's right.
He's going to coach him up a little better now. Mark does a terrific job with that program. So Providence goes on to win. Providence wins 34-7 over Episcopal. So in all likelihood, those two teams, now Providence and Trinity, both move on to the playoffs. It's a 3-team district, 2 advance, so they're going to advance to the playoffs. But Providence and Trinity have a game coming up. Can Providence hang with Trinity? That's the question everyone's going to be asking.
I think, I think the bigger question is, can Providence slow down that Trinity offense? You know, Trinity struggled in some big games against some big teams, but, you know, I think Jamauri Wakefield, with his big offensive line and the skill he has, he's not a small back. I think it's going to be a very, very good challenge to see if that Providence line can move that Trinity defense back.
All right, well, that's a good segue to our second game in this segment. We talk a little bit about that terrific Trinity football team. It was a nationally televised game. Trinity versus IMG Academy down there in Bradenton. Chris Wenke still involved with that group. 2 terrific football teams got together, and let's take a look at some of that tape. Trinity on the road, but it was all IMG in the very early going. Savion Smith recovers a blocked punt, and IMG off to an early 7-0 lead.
Yeah, it's you know, defense and special teams have usually been Trinity's strength, and special teams really abandoned it the other night.
All right, Tony Jones made it 14-0 with a 31-yard touchdown run for IMG. Then that guy Savion Smith again, 2 touchdowns as a defensive player, a 41-yard fumble return. That made it 21-0 IMG. We will show you the one Trinity score. Billy Cobb, a 4-yard pass right here to Chris Barr. So Trinity was able to get on the board. IMG added an oh by the way later. 28-7 IMG beats Trinity. Trinity plays a good schedule. They don't win that game, but they will certainly move on to district play, as we just talked about. One other development out of that game, Kevin Tolliver was injured in that game. Kevin Tolliver, really one of the best recruits in America, not just in the, I mean, one of the top 2 or 3 recruits in the country on some list, on his way to LSU, is committed there, got hurt in this game. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Leg injury, and you just never know with these kind of injuries. I think probably more of a precautionary move that he came out of the game. With district play coming up, and obviously playoffs, defend the state championship, you got to worry about that health. He's not the quarterback now like he was last year most of the time, but he's factors into that offensive game plan. So Trinity's offense doesn't have those playmakers. You cannot afford to lose to Kevin Tolliver.
Yeah, boy, you're exactly right. So we'll see what happens. Trinity loses to IMG, but they'll be back in town continuing beginning this week. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to look at a record pace for Jamauri Wakefield and how he's chasing one of the great record setters of all time for a single season record. That's coming up. We'll also talk about key peak performers of the week. All that's next, so stay with us.
Do you want your team to be the best-looking team in town with the absolute best gear? Then you want Bakers Sports. Since 1997, Bakers Sports has been the stop for sporting goods, equipment, and gear, and has long been preferred by more college and high school teams in Northeast Florida than any other company. Middle school, youth, and Pop Warner, they all use Bakers Sports. Bakers Sports has the best design specialist, embroidery professionals, and silkscreen artists in town. For the best in sporting goods, it's Bakers Sports.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Almost out of time, but we do want to talk about the record-setting pace once again that this guy Jamauri Wakefield's on. All right, right now he has 2,317 yards, Justin, and 34 touchdowns. Derrick Henry had the enormous numbers. Where is he compared to Henry? Where was Henry and where is he compared to him?
You know, Derrick Henry rushed for a huge record his 2012 season when he was a senior, 4,261 yards, state record. He was first nationally that year. At this point in his season, his senior season, Derrick Henry is a little over 2,600 yards.
Okay.
So to give perspective on what Jamauri Wakefield is doing this year, I mean, Jamauri Wakefield is on a national record pace this year.
Pretty amazing. So he could, it's certainly regular season numbers go, he could catch Derrick Henry. Now, of course, Derrick went crazy in that playoff run, and who knows if that'll happen, but he could catch him, right? It's conceivable.
He could catch him. He's going to need some extended playoff games and going to need to turn out those 400-yard games. Derrick Henry had a 485-yard game in the playoffs. So what he did successfully against those teams that he saw was just phenomenal.
Okay, let's show you a list of our peak performers this week. Sandalwood's Eli Peters, 383 total yards in a 49-22 win over Ocala Westport. That was a nice performance.
Yeah, he needed that kind of game for Sandalwood. They've struggled against teams, and district win too.
In Bishop Kenny's 39 victory over Stanton, Jackson Bradley, the quarterback, 7 of 8 for 147 yards, 3 touchdowns. Charles Wade, 4 catches, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's one of the better receivers in the area, isn't he?
One of the best receivers, I think, in the state.
Really that good a player. DeAndre Johnson, we always talk about his numbers. He just keeps on keeping on. 346 yards total, 5 touchdowns. That was important because they beat Flagler Palm Coast 34-30. That was a big game.
Big game for DeAndre Johnson. He also moved past Tim Tebow for second in state in record in area history for passing yards.
And how about these 3 guys at Nice? Nice wins 40-39 over Matanzas. Kendrick Harris, 127 yards. Jordan Willis, 108 yards and 3 touchdowns. Marquise Davis, 102 yards. 3 runners go over 100 yards. That's pretty amazing.
You have 3 runners with that kind of performance and in a 40-39 game. You'd like to see that if you're Tim Krause.
All right, those are our peak performers of the week. Quickly, let's look ahead. What kind of games this week? What should people have their eye on this week?
You know, some district games. I know some good ones on Thursday night. We've got some ones on Friday night that are good. Fletcher is playing on Friday night. We've got some Yulee is playing Bishop Kenny in a big district game. So quite a few games on the schedule this week that are going to go far and factoring into that playoff race.
Mandarin at Sandalwood on Thursday, Columbia at Lee, 2 good Thursday games. Then on Friday, Atlantic Coast at Fleming, Creekside at St. Augustine, even though they're both in the playoffs, it's an interesting game. And West Nassau at Rains. West Nassau's had a nice season, haven't they? 5-2. They play at Rains. That game also has district implications.
Yeah, very much so, and that could really factor into whether Bowles, Rains get in the playoffs. So a very good race on Friday night.
So that's our program, Bakers High School Huddle, where we talk high school football with you. Man, it's a great time in high school football and a great time of the year as these teams chase district championships. We'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel right here on the CW talking more high school football. For Justin Barney, I'm Frank Frangie. So long.